Let's talk about this Apple research, because Apple was all over the place because of how it was blowing up. Well, let's see, what were some of the headlines? It's pouring water on the AI industry and all this other stuff, because let me just explain here's the one sentence summary. AI only gives the illusion of thinking, and it blows up. It collapses in on itself. That's really the genesis of what this report came to find. And it's taking heat from all over. So I'll explain what it's taking heat for, what I think is fair, what things we really need to talk about. And what it really focused on was LRMs, which, if you're not as familiar with LRMs versus LLMs, it's not necessarily a radically different technology so much as the way the technology works. So one is a large language model, one is a large reasoning model. We need to break these down because a lot of the frontier models are large reasoning models, or you can flip on large reasoning capability alongside them, versus, kind of the basic ones. So what's the difference? I think it is important to understand this, because these 3-letter acronyms get thrown around, or we assume everybody knows what they are. Now, just to give an example of what's a large reasoning model, or what are some examples, OpenAI's O1 and O3, DeepSeek R1 would be LRMs, Claude 3.7, Sonnet thinking, Gemini thinking. So think of some of those, the deep research, the thinking models, versus, just OpenAI 4.0, I think would probably be considered more of an LLM, although it has some of its reasoning capabilities built into it. But really what it is LLMs are literally just trying to look at basic pattern recognition. You asked for this, it ingests it, and then it tries to predict what you want. So 2 + 2 = 4, because it's consistently seen in the data. Whenever it sees 2 + 2 together, it just knows 4. So it's purely text prediction. What they wanted to look at was LRMs, which is where it goes a step further and it does this multi-step reasoning. So this is where you see COT, or chain of thought, where it'll do its step-by-step instructions. So it almost does more, and this is where I'm really hesitant to frame it this way because it gets misinterpreted. Self-reflection. So it's reasoning on its reasoning. It's thinking on what it thought about before it actually answers. So, let me add step 2 and 2. The result is 4. So it can explain what it's doing, which is a step towards explainable AI, but it's also, on the surface, looks like more advanced reasoning. So the LLMs are great for fast, efficient, straightforward. I just need you to do this. Very shallow reasoning. It's not going to do a lot of problem solving. So if you need it to help generate a description for a YouTube video, an LLM is fine. You don't need it to do some deep reasoning on how did you come to that conclusion. If you're putting in a financial report and asking it to come up with what are 10 of the most, ideal patterns in this, you're not going to want an LLM, because it's just going to look for pure pattern recognition and spit it out. It might give you some stuff to go off of. An LRM supposedly will then do more of its analysis on, well, here's what I'm seeing. Then let me actually draw conclusions. I'm actually checking on this. It's thinking, supposedly. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of the difference between an LRM, LLM, which is why you see different models used for different things like advanced coding, advanced problem solving, versus people generating AI slop on the internet. Those are your LLMs. What they discovered, though, which I think was really kind of fascinating with this, was these LRMs are getting much better at looking like they're doing reasoning. And I've talked about this in a number of updates. They look like they're, mulling through all this different stuff. And when you ask it to explain its chain of thought, it gives very detailed answers for how it does it, which is extremely deceptive in that it looks like, wow. It's like when somebody rambles, and if they ramble long enough, you're just convinced that they gave you they thought about this deeply. So that must mean their answer is more comprehensive, more complete. And that's what largely these LRM companies, or, the AI companies, have been pushing, is that it is. Because look how detailed its thinking is. Look at how it's analyzing all this stuff and look at all the details it's sharing. What Apple did was they said, okay, but like, let's actually look at, is it producing better results? And this is something I talk about all the time. Just because something looks really good does not mean it's better. It might be more convincing. It might sound much more robust and therefore make you think, wow, this is actually powerful. But Apple said, well, let's test it. And what they did was they looked at the 3 different levels of complexity. So low complexity, hey, there's not a lot of complexity. The LLMs, just the pattern recognition, you don't need it to think, you just need it to do. LLMs perform better. Actually putting LRMs on it actually was worse. So this is one of the ones where I sometimes see this where people go, oh, I like to use the more advanced models on my more mundane tasks because it gives a better output. And I'm like, actually, according to Apple's research, no, it doesn't. And that's been my own personal experience, is whenever I ask a more advanced LRM model to give me a response or an answer to something that's low, I'm like, actually, no, it's worse. And the data proves it. Apple was like, yeah, no, if you're putting an LLM or an LRM on stuff. Now, this should help inform business leaders, decision makers, because there's going to be pressure to use the more advanced, more expensive models on certain things, which goes back to something I say all the time. We need to be digging into, what are we really asking it to do? What is the complexity of what we need it on? And of course, an AI company is going to want you to pay for the more expensive tokens for basic tasks. Well, the data shows you don't want to use the more expensive tokens on basic tasks. The basic model, the LLM, will produce better results. So if you're a decision maker, all the more reason to be looking at, what are we actually asking it to do? And what is the right model to be using for certain things? Because we could be overpaying millions, hundreds of millions, potentially billions of dollars spent on a Ferrari to go get groceries. And in practice, that model holds up, that example holds up, because a Ferrari is a terrible thing to go get a big grocery order for. You're going to need to take 10 trips. It's inefficient. You're going to end up spending more on just maintenance on all this just to get groceries. Like, what are you doing? And the same is true with AI. If you're using these advanced reasoning models on basic automation tasks, you are not only spending way more money than you need to, but you're getting a worse result. So I think that's one thing that, and I dug through all the details of it, there's strong evidence that that is the case. So if you're a decision maker, you need to know that. If you're an individual, you need to know that, because there can be the temptation, oh, the more advanced one, better results. Actually, no. If you're asking one of the more advanced models to give you basic responses to simple tasks, and not simple, don't think simple just like super simple, like what we might consider advanced reasoning, like, hey, what would be a really compelling YouTube description for this? Or how might I kick off something like that? That is a simple task. That is a simple task. That is not an advanced reasoning task. So it's important to understand what simple task versus advanced task is. So low complexity, LLMs crushed it. Medium complexity, that's where the LRMs start to outperform things. So that's where we start to see, okay, these LRMs begin to do a better job, because when you start getting into that blurry territory between basic, reasoning, I just need you to do something versus I need you to think about this a little bit, the LRMs start to outperform. Okay. It's still not perfect, which is why you need to do a critical analysis of how advanced is this really? And is this a medium complexity, or is this really low complexity type of thing? Because again, you might be overpaying. You might be getting worse results on this. But if it is medium complexity, this is where the LRMs perform better. So if you're doing more advanced tasks, this is where they perform. But what was fascinating, and this is the part that just blew apart the industry that Apple's taking tons of heat for, is on high complexity, zero accuracy. I mean, it just fell off the planet. So if you're asking it to do advanced, highly complex things, at some point, it reaches a level of complexity that it falls through the floor. It just literally bottoms out, and its accuracy is absolute garbage in terms of what it's producing. And so I think this is really important to consider with this, because going back to overdependency and going, okay, we're going to hand it this really, really complicated stuff. And these advanced reasoning models that we're being told are smarter than everybody is going to fix this for us. The data doesn't support it. Now, as you can imagine, there's lots of people throwing shade on Apple's research going, yeah, you're only saying that because you're behind in the AI race and you're trying to throw water on all your competitors. Not a core, and I dug into the research, and I feel it's very strong and very compelling in terms of how they went about it. And it also matches what Apple has a history of doing, which is they're not first to the party. They don't throw all their eggs in the hype basket and think we'll just figure it out on the other end. They usually are slower and more thoughtful in what they do, and they wait to see what's really going on here, and then we're going to come into play. And I think that's what they're doing here. So to the people who are Apple haters or going, yeah, this is just people trying to slow down progress, I'd encourage you to actually go read the actual report and see what it says, because you'll see the data in there. And I think it's really important that, yeah, when it gets up into this advanced thinking, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Now you might go, well, why? Why not? What's happening? Here's the best way I can explain it. I think actually it's because it's not actually reasoning. And this isn't just unique to AI. So I don't want to just say this is just an AI problem. But here's where things fall apart: overthinking is a major problem. It's a major problem for this. You see in the data, like in the beginning, it actually almost gets the right answer at first in advanced reasoning. And then it gets caught in its reasoning cycle. And as it does, it just exponentially gets worse. Now, I think we can all relate to that. Have you ever overthought a problem where had you gone with your initial gut instinct, you would have been right? And the data shows you that I remember this from academics. People were like, if you're taking a test, usually go with your initial instinct. Almost the vast majority of time, it's correct compared to when you sit and go, no, that can't possibly be it. Let me rethink that. I have to. AI models do the same thing. They run into the same problem. They start overthinking themselves. They actually talk themselves out of the right answer. And it happens consistently. The further it goes down the line, the further it falls off. And so when you're asking it to reason these very advanced, complex things, it's why it falls through the floor, because you're actually asking it to go super deep. And the deeper it goes, the further it falls off. And I think, one of the things they said, and I think it's a fair point, is it's not actually reasoning. It's not actually thinking critically, even though it looks like it. It's designed to mimic us. And so it looks like it is, it comes up with a conclusion and it looks like, oh, I'm reanalyzing and all this other stuff, but it doesn't generalize things very well. So it can't actually come up with a general consensus and then test its general consensus and pressure test it, all this other stuff. So it doesn't reason the way a team of human beings coming together, pressure testing each other on some of this stuff. But like I said, even humans are vulnerable in this. We do the same thing. We'll have a great idea and we'll literally murder the great idea because we spent way too much time thinking about it. It's not good. It's not good. The more advanced, it just consistently showed, the more advanced you go, the worse it gets. Now, I think this is problematic because you would say, well, this conflicts with what we're seeing in all the current benchmarking data. Well, that's because a lot of these benchmarks that are saying, oh, it's just getting so much better, they're benchmarking the wrong things. And they're looking at measures that aren't necessarily telling us, is it getting us a better result? Is it actually getting us to a better outcome? No, it's not. And that's extremely concerning. And I think it goes back to, we might have to rethink how, because going back to what I said about the difference between an LLM and an LRM, they're different, but they're still based on language alone. So it's still just looking at word patterns, word structures, things like that, and then reflecting and meditating on the same thing, but it's just kind of spinning and then spitting out a different answer. I think you almost have to look at the architecture if we're going to break through this. If we just keep saying, well, just have it spend more time looking at the language over and over and over, you got to think about it. And this is something I talk about with AI all the time. With AI, if it trips up early on, the further it goes, it's just going to amplify what it does, which is what you see happening with these LRMs, is it gets the right answer kind of, but there might, or mostly, but any of those flaws, then as it continues its line of reasoning, just get amplified. And so by the time you get to the end, it's just way off. It's just way off. It's not even accurate anymore. And I think that's where the way we're doing it, we keep trying to refine and perfect the LLM architecture. And I think what this is showing is, hey, we got to like re-architect this stuff, which makes me wonder if Apple is actually working on new ways of reasoning, ways of doing something different. And again, this is talking about hitting the ceiling that all AI models have hit with their neural networks. They kind of hit a ceiling, a wall. And then after that, it's kind of like, okay, well, it can't really go beyond this. This is very problematic given how many companies are counting on AI and these advanced models to do more of their work. I see this with tech companies who are wiping out their developers, going, well, we've got these advanced AI models that are crushing benchmarks. They're more effective than our humans. And it's like, actually not. And now you're banking on them, and you may not even realize how wrong it is until it's too late. So, yeah, all that to say, this is another reason why we need to slow down. You need to really critically analyze, what are you actually using AI on? Are you using the right model? Are there things we should just go, AI is not actually going to be good for this? Because if we ask it to, whatever it gives us is actually going to be wrong. And so where do we draw the line and go, this is as far as AI is going to take us? And then we need humans to close the loop. We need humans to take over in the advanced reasoning, because AI just can't. Is it ever going to get there? I don't even want to speculate on it, because the models are changing so fast. But I see why the AI companies are not happy with AI's research, and why it does kind of blow the lid off. Hey, those benchmarks that you're using to market how your AI can do the work of the most seasoned, advanced professionals, and you can just get rid of people. Actually, no, you can't. And you're not going to notice it because it looks very convincing. Its thinking is very convincing. And that's why I think the article, The Illusion of Thinking, is spot on, because it is creating the illusion. You've got these critical, thoughtful, well-reasoning AI models, and actually they're not. So be careful.